So good afternoon to all our esteemed guests, both physically on location here in this space and all online across the different locations. As is customary at CUT, before we start, let's please take a moment and observe a moment of reflection, of silent reflection. Thank you. Could you hear me? Can we? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So before I start recognizing people that we're going to have, it's also customary for us that we always start things on time. So unfortunately, the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training is going to arrive around 7, so he'll just join in. And then our main guest speaker, Advocate Luiza Zondo, he has joined us online because unfortunately also due to some developments in the family, she couldn't come physically, but we're very, very grateful that she's able to join us online. So I want to start off by then recognizing in absentia, he's still coming, our Honorable Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, Buti Manamela, our distinguished guest speaker and author of Dearest Mariki, A Mother's Journey Through Grief, Trauma and Healing, Advocate Luiza Zondo, our CUT executive leadership team, the deans and all management and staff, the leadership of Labour and the Student Representative Council, all our staff, students, friends and partners of the Central University of Technology who are physically here this evening and online across a diversity of locations. It's my singular privilege to welcome you all to this very important event that we are hosting this evening to engage on mental health. You will recall that World Mental Health Day is celebrated on the 10th of October every year. And yesterday at our Welcome campus, we hosted a mental health awareness event together with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, Higher Health, and the Free State Department of Health. Events such as these provide an invaluable opportunity to foster dialogue, awareness, and understanding surrounding mental health issues. This year's theme is Mental Health is a Universal Human Right. And the goal which we share and want to continue to practice as the Central University of Technology is to contribute towards improving knowledge, promoting advocacy, raising awareness, and driving actions that protect mental health as a human right. Raising awareness and opening up spaces for dialogues such as these help to reduce the stigma and discrimination associated with mental illness and encourages the seeking of support and or treatment where required before the mental health challenge reaches a crisis point. As the World Health Organization says, there is no health without mental health. It is my hope that this evening will assist us to break the silence, improve or change our conversations about mental health on campuses, in the workplace, and within our communities, and to pursue effective approaches and actions. We have the collective wisdom right here as a university and as partners to turn the tide. We have the collective expertise to even influence policy at national level, and we have expertise in teaching and learning, in innovative research and scholarly publications, in student and staff support interventions, and the outreach efforts we engage in with our communities. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's allow our distinguished guests and panelists this evening to address us on this topic through sharing stories, key messages, and concrete actions and lived experiences, and actions that are currently being implemented or solution-oriented action plans that could be pursued. So this evening's proceedings will start with Advocate Zondo sharing some key messages from her lived experience as outlined in her book. Then we will have the Deputy Minister when he arrives, whom we know very well is very passionate about youth empowerment and education, to share some of his reflections and key messages from a national government department perspective. And then from each one of our internal stakeholders on the panel, we will have a brief contribution on the lived experience of interventions for students or staff, as well as reflections on effective approaches. Then we will have a question and answer session, so that our guests, Advocate Zondo and the Minister and the panelists can also engage with you, and you can ask them questions and they can address the questions and make comments. What we would like to have really is more of a conversational kind of session this evening, and not, like we are presenting lectures and talking as experts to people who need to know. We want to have an interactive session. So we'll try our best to save as much time so that there is more engagement. So to get started, ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly introduce Advocate Zondo. And while I will leave out the details about how our paths having crossed at Inanda Seminary in the 1980s, the girls' boarding school at Inanda just outside of Durban, I do need to emphasize, though, our shared allegiance to the school motto, "Shine where you are," which I believe permeates evidently through Advocate Zondo's passion for meaningful transformation and respect for human rights. So to introduce Advocate Zondo, I quote directly from her bio on the Inanda Seminary website. She's an advocate of the High Court of South Africa and holds a BProc degree from the University of Limpopo, an LLB degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and a Master of Laws degree specializing in public law and political science from the London School of Economics. Her deep commitment to improving people's lives is shown in the many leadership roles that she has played, including the following: as the CEO of Bertha Goa Foundation, non-executive director of Oxfam South Africa, non-executive director of the Fountain of Healing, the head of Secretariat of the National Education Crisis Forum, the CEO of the Office of the Public Protector, the General Manager, Legal and Compliance Services at SASO, General Counsel at South African Airways, the CEO of the National Nuclear Regulator, the Secretary to the Preparatory Commission for the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization in Vienna, Austria, the Deputy Executive Director in the Constitutional Assembly's Secretariat, and as the founding CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. With that brief introduction, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to hand over to you, Advocate Zondo, to share your story. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Pamela Dube. Greetings to all faculty, all leadership of the university, all students, and the entire university family. And warm greetings to the Deputy Minister in his absence. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It is indeed a mighty great pleasure for me to sit with you tonight and deal with this very important topic of mental health and well-being. I come into this topic with my own peculiar story and my own peculiar journey, but I by no means believe that my journey and my story is particularly unique or quite distinguished from the many, many, many stories that many of us are able to tell from the experiences of our own lives. I am the mother to Ricky Rick Mercado, who was a very well-established artist and creative in the hip hop culture, and was very, very passionate about all forms of art, including fashion. He, at the age of 34, found himself unable to continue living, and by suicide on the 23rd of February 2022, he passed. Now, for any mother who encounters news of the passing of a child, this is unthinkable pain. This is unthinkable trauma. There is just no way any intervention, any prior information, source, or experience could prepare a parent for that experience. So when I got the news on the 23rd of February that my son's wife, Bianca, was unable to access the studio after dropping children at the school, and because of being worried that he had not come home, even though he had called in the early hours of the morning and said he was just finishing some work and was on his way home, but he had not come home. She had fallen asleep and he had not come. So after dropping children at school, she goes to the studio where he was working and found that the car is outside. She's not able to access the studio, and she was utterly worried. So she calls me while I was starting a strategy session with Oxfam South Africa at a venue in somewhere along the Henops in Centurion. And this is now an encounter that nobody can ever be prepared to hold. And she says in the call, "Mama, please come. I'm worried. I cannot access the studio. Ricardo's car is outside." And within the period of 20 minutes, I received news that my son had not made it. He had passed. The thing about traumatic grief, and I will talk about both grief and trauma. The thing about traumatic grief is that it affects all aspects of life. It has a biological, physiological impact. It has a cognitive, mental effect. It has an absolute overall disconnection with sense making. It creates that absolute disconnection with sense making. So from that moment when I got the news, I was aware that there were things to be done and I was doing them. But as I was doing all of this, there was also a sense in me that there is a separation. It's almost as if I'm looking at myself participating in life. And yet there's a huge sense that everything is gone. There's no life. Everything is gone. I don't understand anything. I don't know how to be. And this is constantly present alongside the process of continuing to make the phone calls that needed to be made, going to the to that resuscitation room in the hospital, viewing the body, doing the prayers, supporting the many, many, many young people that were utterly devastated, supporting them and just holding them and just telling them how sorry I am, and just being there and allowing the circle of friends that I had to come in and say these many words and be in many forms of support, but nothing was making sense. I just couldn't. I couldn't even do the one natural thing of falling asleep when the body was tired. So for 5 constant days, sleep was not there. At least on the 4th and the 5th day, some 2 hours of sleep were possible. But eating, couldn't do it. Now this is devastation. There were times when this devastation actually caused me to sense that actually there's no life, and that I am actually dead myself, or I am dying myself. That sense of deep, deep dread would be there. What is amazing, though, is that whereas all of this was the center of my being, this is what I was experiencing in the waking moments all the day and into the silent moments where everybody was asleep and I would stay awake. And at those times, I would go into all sorts of material which would remind me of my son, which would connect me to my son, and I would seek that. I would yearn for all sorts of contact with my son, and I would stay awake. Fortunately, because of the field of practice that he was in, there was lots of material that I could relate to. There was music, there were all sorts of videos, there were interviews, his voice was everywhere. So I would go into this material. I needed to, and it would devastate me. And at the same time, it would give me something that I needed to hold on to. I tell this story because I went on to experience everything that I could look at and glean opportunities from, opportunities for me to find some ways of shifting myself from this acute state of grief, shift myself into a place where I was learning to engage with myself first and to engage with the experience of this changed and continuously changing life. I mentioned that all sorts of feelings, from the place of complete blame and guilt, to the sense of complete fear and anger and sadness. All of this I would experience. And I had to find ways of lifting myself out of the darkness that comes from the mind, body, and spirit that is wrapped up in these emotions, in these debilitating feelings. And I was blessed to have some of this. One particular blessing was that I had already established a particular affinity for being out in nature, and particularly for being in the mountains. And I had a trip that had been planned before Ricardo passed on the 23rd of February. And this was a trip with a group of women where we would go up trekking up Mount Everest in Nepal, up to base camp. When news of Ricardo's passing hit, I did not know what I was going to do about that, and I was not even able to think about it. But as I continued to live and to move myself through all the emotions, on the day of his funeral, I had a huge sense that the mountains would be my opportunity, my real opportunity to deeply connect with Ricardo, to deeply connect with Ricardo's spirit, and to see what I was not able to see in the rush and the rolling patterns of being and doing that I was in Johannesburg. So on the day of Ricardo's funeral on the 1st of March 2022, I had a clear sense that I was going to go up and trek with my group to Mount Everest. We did that. And as I walked up Mount Everest, I was giving myself the opportunity also to journal something, to journal the experience of walking with Ricardo. And so even though I was not familiar with social media and all these different platforms, I was really not familiar with their operation. I only had a Facebook account, which I hardly participated in. The young people in my family helped by getting me to share my posts on the daily experiences of walking up the mountain. And they helped me post on social media. And this had an enormous effect that I had not anticipated. I had, and my whole family had experienced this immense warmth and embrace from people upon the news of Ricardo passing, becoming public. There was just this enormous outpouring of love and care. And this gave the sense that we are not alone. And it helped a bit. It did shift that something from that place of being in acute grief, almost immobilizing grief. And when the posts that I was writing or putting up as I was walking up Mount Everest, elicited stories from many people where they were saying, thank you for sharing these feelings about your experience with the passing of your son and about your open reaching out and connection to your son in the way that you are doing. Because when you share like this, you help me to engage with my story. My story has been in me, and I have felt like I am stuck in it. And yet now you have given me a mechanism of going into my story, opening it up, and allowing my story to give me new pathways to deal in healthier ways, to deal in healing ways with the grief and the trauma that I have experienced. This was the thrust of the many, many communications I received from people of all ilk, young, the old, people who had lost children, people who had lost parents, loved ones, friends, people who were directly impacted by the loss of Ricardo. And we're saying, because you're sharing like this, you are helping me because I had no real connection to Ricardo, but I feel this loss. It's affecting me in so many ways. And so I realized that possibly the sharing of stories is a mightily powerful way of opening up a lot of conversation, a lot of connecting channels for us to start sharing and growing from the debilitating sense of grief. And in fact, so debilitating is grief that it actually causes our bodies to fall ill. There are studies that actually do show the propensity of our bodies to suffer more disorders as a result of the grief, particularly within the first 6 months of the loss of a loved one that may have caused us this devastating grief. So I then came back from the mountain with a sense of euphoria as I was coming back down in the mountain, going onto that plane that leads us to Kathmandu, from which we then fly back home. I had this sense of euphoria. I had this sense that the mountains had facilitated my healing. I had the sense that I had direction. I had ways of handling this loss, this deep loss of my son. Lo and behold, I land in Johannesburg. My third born son, Themba, comes to collect me at the airport. I just cannot explain to you the sense that I had. I was so angry. I was so angry. I was so harsh on my loving son receiving me after some 16 days of not seeing me, of me having been in a place that was potentially dangerous. in the mountains, because in the mountains there is that possible effect of the body not being able to absorb enough oxygen, and then life being threatened by that. So my son is coming in, embracing me, and I just am not able to deal with any of that. For days, I am caught in this place of just being closed in, unable to relate to anybody, and I'm nasty, really nasty. I'm hateful, but I realize that this is how I am. And I was at my daughter-in-law's home, and I realized that I must go to my grandchildren at my son's house, my firstborn son's house, and try and, recalibrate, force myself to recalibrate out of this. I don't think they had seen me that nasty. I couldn't relate to anybody. I just was pushing everything away. I couldn't deal with it. I had no happiness. I did manage to get myself out of that. I did manage to see the damage I had caused. I did try to cause repair with my family, to call them in and say, I hurt you. It was not intentional. Let's try and repair. I will do by all means, I will do everything I can to not go into that place. Now, that place was a place I was used to. It was a place of constriction, and my life had been very, very used to being constricted. My book is called Dearest Mariki, A Mother's Journey Through Grief, Trauma, and Healing. You will ask me why my book, which is meant to be a story about the grief of losing a beloved son by suicide, ends up being a book which looks at my life, looks at the whole of my life. And the story in this book is a story of my life. It starts in the beginning in KwaMashu in 1964, when I'm born into a family of my father, who was a social worker, and my mother, who was a nurse. And I'm born into a family that was tremendously restricting in what the children needed to do, were allowed to do, because this was the pattern that my parents had decided was going to protect their children from the real devastating effects of the apartheid system, where Black people were put into township environments, and they were put into circumstances where violence was a very huge presence, and the dehumanizing of our souls, dehumanizing in so many ways, was something that everybody had to navigate, and therefore our environments were volatile. KwaMashu had, from those days when it was established, it had the caricature of the killing fields. It was called Esinqawunqawini kwamfazi ushaya indoda. You know, it has been tagged a death capital not only of the country, it has been in the list in its history as a death capital even of the world. So my parents had all these rules. And I know that many, many, many Black parents, and Black is a political notion which includes, in my use of it right now, African, colored, Indian, people who are classified African, colored, and Indian. And there are many, many families that had this approach to keep the children protected from the violence of the living spaces that apartheid confined Black people to. And my home, though, had unique rules. For example, my father and mother had the notion that if we learned to live according to the ways of white people, if we were accustomed to white people's ways, we probably would not fall prey to being in awe or in fear or feel subordination to them. And they required us to speak English at home. From childhood, the language that we, as myself and my two siblings, my two sisters, would speak at home was was English. We had a language rule. From the time the child learns to eat, we all sat at table. From the time the child learned to hold the utensils, we're all trained in table manners. We would be eating with the fork and knife. The setting of the table in a particular way was the order of the day when we sat at the table for all meals. This was not a standard procedure. So when we stepped out of our the periphery of our yard, we met all those things such as, yo, yeah, are the black whites, abelungu abamnyama. And that was hard for any child. It would be hard to go to school and realize that you have to be distinguished in ways that were not flattering, and you had to bear this. And so my patterns then developed to be the patterns of learning to be very, very compliant. So I was very minded to keep the language rule. I was very minded to do everything that the many, many rules in our home required. And I was doing this because at the back of my mind, I believed that this is what will make me valuable. This is what will make me loved by my parents. This is what will cause life to be easier for myself and for everybody. That it became a deeply set pattern of approaching life, such that the domination of rules over everything led me to be the one who negated my free senses and kept me in the head, very much in the head, focused on what it is that may cause me to be valuable. That pattern led to me moving very fast through school, moving very fast through university. By the age of 21, I was doing the LLB. By the age of 30, I was the deputy executive director at Constitutional Assembly, and the writing of the Constitution was a primary focus. And by the age of 32, I was the first CEO of the Human Rights Commission. Interwoven in all of that was the pattern of not stopping to look at what was happening in my life. I just was rolling with events, not even stopping to analyze who I was, and not stopping to analyze why I was so afraid, why internally I was so unsure, why I was unable to embrace the story that I actually was valuable, that the successes, the milestones that I was reaching were actually milestones that the being that I am was contributing to. I had this deep, deep, deep imposter syndrome, which debilitated me in so many ways. I was always without peace. I was always frightened. My makeup was always that of being at risk. And this stems from the patterns I had developed from childhood, patterns of never ever stopping to assess who I am, to assess my stories, to debunk the falsities of these senses that I was carrying with me. And so that inability to stop and assess and see who I truly am was also affecting me, because life will have traumatic experiences. And because I was unable to stop and look, I never looked at my traumas. Some of the major traumas that I experienced would have been, and I write about them in the book, would have been, for example, entering university at the age of 16 and falling in love. I don't know whether to call it that, but securing a boyfriend, and without really knowing and actually being prepared for it, finding myself having had an encounter with sexual intercourse. Now, I had come from a boarding school of girls only. Pamela has already mentioned it, Inanda Seminary. And when it's girls only, there's all sorts of freedom. And even for me, who was that constricted, boarding school with girls was freedom. I engaged with freedom, and we had our quirks, and some of the stories which we shared were about sexuality, and we sort of very naturally came to agreements that we, good as we are, valued as we are, we would not have sex before we turned 21. And I had just turned 17 in my first year at university when I came back came back on a Saturday morning, did not tell my friends anything, and sat at my desk and wrote a letter to my mother in KwaMashu to tell her that I had sex. The question about why that happened only came to be properly answered in the writing of this book. I had never shared that experience and the impact it had on me with my friends throughout my life. And at the age 59, I, for the first time, was able to tell myself what was happening. I was able to tell myself that that encounter was very confusing. It was disintegrating for me. I didn't know how to go to my group of friends. We had a room where we gathered, and it was very safe and beautiful environment. It was just where we all went to, but I didn't go there. I went to my own hostel room and sat at my desk, and I wrote to my mother, because at that age, with a child who is not prepared for what actually happens, today we actually can say that story, Louisa, sounds like a Reiki experience. And it's only in this year, in the writing of the book, that I was able to give myself an assessment of that experience. I had not done so before. Another hugely traumatic experience, which I just rolled over, was that of the crumbling of my marriage. And my marriage crumbled in an incident of domestic violence where I, being the very gentle and very measured one who was very minded to be compliant in many ways, found myself stabbing a man who was my husband. And as he was taken to hospital, I remained in the home, cleaning up the stains of blood that were in a white rug, which was in the front room of our home. I never went into any debriefing process. I very quickly was whisked out of the country to start my master's program in the UK at that point. And it was absolutely, absolutely devastating to realize that even with such huge trauma, I had just allowed myself to bury what had happened into a box and close that box and hope and pray that there was no flapping of the covers of that box. The most devastating event, most traumatic event, which again, even my body helped me to not deal with, was that of a home invasion in Johannesburg. I had moved to Johannesburg from Cape Town to do my job as a CEO of the South African Human Rights Commission. And my birthday was on the 5th of February, and the Friday was the 6th. So I had a nice birthday dinner with my friends. And at this birthday dinner, I was going to reveal my new boyfriend who's now my husband, Kumi Naidu. And we had a wonderful time together. He cooked for us, and then they went to their homes for us to wake up in the early hours of the morning on the 7th of February to people in the house who assaulted us, beat us up badly. I was aware, though, that my mind felt like I was falling in and out of sleep as all of this was happening, because even though my arm was terribly bruised and the side of my face was virtually blue, I didn't know what had happened to me. And it was Kumi who told me how I had been beaten up and how I had been dragged out of the room. We had choir matting on our floor and had been drawn down the two steps that led from the bedroom area to the front area of the home. I had been separated from him. And what happened in the period when I was separated from him was completely hidden from my conscious mind for all these 24 and a bit years, until with Ricardo's passing, I could not continue with my ways of dealing with life, my ways of masking what was happening, my ways of not going into the examination of what my experience was and giving sense, making sense of that. I was devastated. I couldn't cope with that. And for the first time in my life, I went to therapy and I stayed in therapy. I went into talk therapy. I started with talk therapy. I was exposed to more than that. I was given the opportunity to do body work, breath work, deep meditations. I even had the exposure to psychedelic science-based treatment. And as a result of that journey, a suppressed memory of a very brutal rape by the 4 people who had entered our home on that occasion surfaced. And for the first time in my life, I knew what the story of my being was. I knew why I was devoid of peace. I knew why I just could not be an open person with my children. I knew why I would come home from work and just want to see nobody and just want to go into my room, lock myself in. Sometimes I would be able to come out after a while. Sometimes I would not. I understood that I needed to walk with my body and find ways of healing, walk with myself and find ways of continuously avoiding my body's inability to carry me, because my body I was falling quite a lot. I was having many episodes where I would be triggered and I would find myself on the floor. I do not know how many times in this year I have had to go into the emergency room and I had to have the head examined because I would have fallen on it. But now, with therapy, I am learning to know how to hold myself and to give myself opportunity to shift out of those spaces where I am caught in the trouble and allow my body to repair, to get out of that state of being unable to hold everything and to fall down. I wrote this book because it is a story which I could not tell my son, Ricardo, in his attempt to make meaning of his own life and the troubles in his life, had asked me to share the story of my life with him. I promised, and I was really intending to share the story. I tried, I could not tell him. I promised to write him letters to tell the story of my life to him. I tried many times. Bianca, Ricardo's wife, would see me attempting to write these letters in their home. I could not. I did not have the capacity to form a coherent story of my life because I was blocked by the trauma that would not allow me to go into an assessment of who I am, my body and mind had closed in and collaborated to protect me from that story. So it needed treatment which gave me the assurance, which gave my body, which gave my mind the assurance that it was safe to go into that experience in order for me to deal with the whole of myself. For many years in my life, I was very destructive. I was destructive to my relationship with my now husband. Even though we loved each other and we knew this, we were not able to be in a loving, intimate relationship for many years of our being together. And we decided that we will be together even as friends. But when Ricardo passed, his passing was almost a gift and an opportunity for me to regain my life by going to therapy and going for months and months into processes that helped me to find ways of my body and my mind to feel safe to go into a traumatic experience that happened 25 years before he passed. And this helped me to start taking in tools for looking at life in a more healthy way, learning to be more vulnerable, learning to be more communicative. I have other children that are alive, starting to build relationships with them that are built on more truthful, open, honest engagement about what is happening with us. And of course, my children have been raised by me in this constricted way, and they've learned those ways as well of not communicating. So they themselves are learning now, and we are all learning together to start engaging with our stories, stories of what happened to us, stories of how we experienced different events and what they did to us. And when we do that with our stories, we are learning now as a family. There is still a lot of challenge in my family, but we are learning that love is the only reality. Love is the only reality. And so from the place of love, we can start learning to live life based on the knowledge that we are not what has been done to us. We are not what has happened to us. We are much, much, much more than that. We are spirit that has so much capability, and we can go everywhere with that. I really would truly like to stop at this point and to say that I wrote this book because it was clear to me that mental health and well-being is the fundamental thing that we should be centering in all our endeavors in society, because we come from there and we bring out what is us. And so a constricted mother in that fractal way is going to raise constricted children. And it grows like that. And what they do in the world is most likely to be a trauma response from how they had been deprived of the emotion, the connection, the openness from a healthier mother. So I am learning even now, so it's never too late to start. I'm learning to be a more open mother. And we are walking the journey with my family. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Advocate Zondo, for sharing such deeply profound insights and for opening yourself up to us and sharing from a very personal space, from a very touching space. It is not easy. And I think what you are doing is really tremendous in sharing in the way that you are, because you are also contributing to our own development, to our own realization of how much our own experiences can impact on other people's experiences. But at the end of the day, that we also can realize that we are more than the sum of our experiences, that there is so much that we can learn from the wrongs and from the variety of experiences in our uniqueness as human beings. So really, before, I know there's a lot that we can explore. I read the book, and you can imagine, I cried many times, but it's one thing also when you get to hear from the person who really experienced that trauma, that grief, and realizes how much mental health actually can play a role. The state of your mental health can play a huge role in how you experience your life. So, Advocate Zondo, we really thank you for your openness. I did say that we would like to have this as a more of an interactive engagement. And true to the Deputy Minister's word, he did come before 7, and I really do appreciate that. I had thought I would allow 1 or 2 questions just to get you in and get to appreciate some of the, the key messages that we as the audience here and online. I don't want to forget the people online, because there are quite a number of people that committed to joining online from also across different locations. So I really, if you don't mind, Minister, I know I'm going to have you as next, but if I could just allow 1 question online, 1 question here, just to get Advocate Zondo also to think about the key messages that we should be exploring further. So is there any question that somebody would like to raise from in the room? I know there are others also that are sitting in the, on the couches outside this space. I'm not sure, can anybody see if there are any questions online or comments? We'll still have a session afterwards, after everybody has talked of question and answers. I'm just giving this to make sure you regroup after this sharing of this very profound story. To you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Larato. I'm also a student at SUT. So my question is, since like according to Dr. Advocate Zondo, just like she said, she grew up the way she was, so they were street at home. So like, and then after they were so street, it happens when she goes outside to experience the world, it happens then she started to experience the trauma from the external factors from outside. So it seems like those kind of things, they are the ones that are affecting their mental health. So like, can we like maybe having a proper way of like helping like as the young generation or the upcoming generation to make sure whatever it is being applied inside their house, they can also be applied external so that they can be prepared from experiencing this kind of traumas, because other people, they can't be able to like have the power to be able to overcome or to be able to like challenge that kind of problems in their lives. That's why others are tending to be committing suicide and so on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm not sure, Advocate Zondo, did you hear the comment and question? Okay, but maybe before you respond, is there any other online or just one in the room, so that at least we don't leave you out of this interactive session? Is there another question? Can somebody see if online there's any comment or question? Yes, ma'am. Sorry, the lady here in the front. Thank you.
Sorry, evening to the house and everyone that is watching online. My name is Jemina Mukwena. I am the Deputy President of the institution, SRC body, and also an entrepreneur. My question is short. I don't know why I'm feeling scared, but I'll get through it. Advocate Zondo did mention that some things that happened in her life, she was able to actually, articulate or actually process when she was at an older age. So my concern is majority of the youth that is not in this room to actually hear what we are hearing at this moment, what she has gone through, how she has overcome her challenges, because I did note down a few points that we are not alone. We can not let our situations define how we react to maybe our goals and what we set for ourselves, the goals that our families have for us, because most of the young people that are in these institutions, you find that my mom wants me to graduate, my mom wants me to be able to operate a business, but I have traumas that I'm facing because my mom is facing traumas and she's not aware that I'm aware that she's facing traumas. How do we as the youth make it a point that we make it aware to other external young people that are out there that are not actually even concerned to even RSVP for such events, who are just living and saying, I'm young, I will face it at an older age. Let me not prolong my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, let me not also summarize what you've said. As long as Advocate Zondo heard, I think your questions are also in a way related. Over to you, Advocate Louisa.
Thank you so much for those very important questions. The first one is about how we protect ourselves from trauma. The question leads me directly to the wisdom from that very, very small book, Men's Search for Meaning. It's written by Viktor Frankl. a survivor of the Holocaust. And it's quite a seminal work on the human psyche and effective approaches to psychology and to treatment of our traumas. But the wisdom that applies directly to that question is about the reality that it is not what happens to us which matters. And that addresses the question of how do we protect ourselves from trauma. It is not what happens to us which matters. What matters is how we make meaning of it. And so the Holocaust is one huge example of a traumatic experience that humanity would go through. But we go through trauma. And the definition that I like to use for what is trauma is the one which refers to trauma as typically what happens when we encounter devastating danger and we find ourselves unable to do anything about it. And that is trauma. It can happen as a physical thing, an emotional thing, but it is this danger which comes upon us and we just find we can't do anything about it. What matters, it happens in life, but what matters is how we make meaning of it. There are many ways of making meaning. There are circles that help us to realize that we are not alone. We are not stuck. We are still this beautiful, holistic, treasured spirit that has the ability to move into spaces and create beauty, find joy, find peace, and be in community. All the things that matter for humanity. So what my parents were focusing in on was rather a limited view of protecting, rather than the wider view of giving the tools for encountering life, of knowing that I can go here and talk and explain and open up and get healing and get soothing in good ways. So maybe that's what society should be focused on teaching young people. And on the second question of how young people can move into more proactive participation in the addressing, encountering, and healing of the traumas that they encounter. I believe that this is the most important question, because once we realize that we have it in us to be vulnerable with our parents in our homes about the traumas that they are hiding, and in our vulnerability, we introduce pathways for them to also start opening up to us about, to the younger ones, about their experience of life. The saddest thing about being the older people is that we were taught to pretend that we were never young. We never went through the things that young people experience. And therefore, what we are teaching young people is that they must hide themselves from the experiences, whereas what we must be teaching is that we must all encounter in ways that provide safety and healing to us. We must all build community that helps us to deal with things. We must all treasure, create rituals that help us to find our true selves, to find our joy, and therefore embrace life in a healthier way. I'm sorry I answered that in a long-winded way, but I hope this opens up to more conversation about the suggestions of learning ways to make meaning of life, no matter what life presents.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again, Advocate Zondo. We are looking forward actually to the question and answer session at the end, which will also still touch on the presentation and the sharing from Advocate Zondo. Deputy Minister, I know I'd like you to know we do respect protocol. We hold it in high esteem here at CUT. And we really would like you to please accept our apologies for starting the evening's proceedings without you. But however, as a university located right in the city center, we are also very mindful of our participants' circumstances. People have got shared transport needs. Some need to walk back to residences or private accommodation and related commitments. So we thought, let's make sure at least that when we have you, we still have another high note in terms of this discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, our Deputy Minister needs no introduction. Minister, we are very excited that you were able to accept our invitation to motivate our students and staff. We know you're very passionate about youth development in particular and empowerment. And we really would like you to share perspectives and actions on mental health from a national government perspective, or whatever key messages you would like to share on this topic. And we look forward to your key messages, and the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me here, and to you, the panel, and also the students, and everyone else who's been involved in the organization of this activity. But I think more importantly to thank Advocate Louisa Zondo for sharing her story, not only with us, but with the rest of the country and the world. It's something that's not easy, I suppose, but I think from sharing our stories, we can learn lessons on how to deal with mental health related issues of trauma and so on and so forth. So I really want to thank her for having shared her story. And besides being the mother of, I think, one of our favorite artists who passed on, Advocate Zondo herself has been a leader in various sections in society, the Human Rights Commission, and various other public institutions where she contributed quite immensely, and I think her contribution still continues, and therefore her voice is as important as any other voice that seeks to share their story as it relates to dealing with and coping with trauma. And I hope that through the engagement throughout the evening, whatever of the evening that's remaining, we will find time to hear more from her. And it is, I think, on that basis that I'm going to be very brief, so that we allow more time for interactions. So I went through a report of the World Health Organization on mental health, and it makes very interesting observations, and I want to start there. So I'm not here to motivate, but hopefully I think to help contribute to the conversation. Part of the conversations include the fact that mental health risks and protective factors can be found in society at different scales. Local threats, heightened risk for individuals, families, and communities. Global threats, heightened risk of whole populations, and can slow worldwide progress towards improved well-being. And there are events and activities that we take for granted that we see as isolated. We see a conflict between Israel and Palestine. We see conflict between Ukraine and Russia. We start thinking about the possibility of a world war, and we begin to relive that kind of trauma as it happened in the past. All of this isolated incident that happen throughout the world, they may not be physically and directly affecting us, but mentally they affect us because they preoccupy our national consciousness. They preoccupy the discussions and dialogue that happens on a daily basis. And therefore we start thinking deeply about those and reflect on the kind of trauma that humanity had survived and the potential of what this kind of trauma can cause. Key threats obviously include economic downturns and social polarization, issues around public health, emergencies, humanitarian emergencies, forced displacement, and growing climate crisis. COVID-19 pandemic was probably the most traumatic experience that this generation has faced. Collectively, of course, there are those who are 80 and 100 years who've seen all the world wars. But collectively as a generation, the COVID-19 pandemic, the global economic crisis, these are some of the incidents that happened which has in one way or another an effect on our mental health. Suicides affects people and their families from all across countries and contexts and at all ages. Globally, there may be 20 suicide attempts to every one death, and yet suicide accounts for more than 1 in every 100 deaths. And so it is a very major cause of death, particularly amongst young people. And we may know 1 or 2 people who have threatened to take their life. We may have taken those threats lightly and may have regretted doing so. And I think it also has to deal with the perception and the attitude that we have towards issues relating to mental health. And I think you raised quite a sharp point that, people don't want to be seen to be associated with or to be perceived to be having mental health issues because people would rather associate with a criminal than with someone with mental health issues, precisely because of those perceptions. And I think it's one of the things which, when I deal with my concluding remarks just now, I want to address. Countries dedicate less than 2% of their healthcare budgets to mental health. And I think we need to ask, what are we doing here? What are we doing in the SRC, in our different students' formations? Are there organizations that are specifically capacitated to deal with mental health and trauma-related issues on our campuses, the kind of support? Higher Health has been our champion in this regard, and I hope that many of you who are here and others who are students of CUT do actively participate in the activities of Higher Health. So it's not a problem of your roommate, your classmate, your lecturer, your fellow student in the university. It's a global problem, and I think we need to think around issues that relates to mental health in that way, that it is a global problem. And the only way in which we can contribute in dealing with it is to look at those who are closer to us and how we, relate and help them go through whatever issues that they may be going through. So what have we done as the department? We have our own team of psychologists who have conducted more than 6,000 interviews with individuals or small groups throughout all our campuses. In fact, I think I need to start here with mentioning the numbers from the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, which observed that 20.8% of first-year students had experienced anxiety and 13.6% had experienced depression. They further found that 30.6% of students had thoughts of suicide in the past 12 months. 16.6% has made a suicide plan, and 2.4% had actually attempted suicide. And so we look at the rate of suicide because that's the ultimate number, meaning that it is when at least someone who may not have seen a professional and so on and so forth would show that, they were probably dealing with, mental health related issues. And so we're doing all these sessions with a team of psychologists throughout our campuses. We've set up a 24-hour crisis line. We've also encouraged campuses to build capacity through campus health and wellness coordinators. 24-hour mental health initiative for student and staff, but also 108,000 mental health or psychosocial interventions which were delivered to students between January and July 2022. We haven't looked at the number of the last half of last year and of the first half of this year. We're also strengthening campus counseling services across not only universities but also at TVET colleges. And so because of this, our psychosocial support counseling unit has provided support to close to 24,000 students in January, from January 2021 to June this year. And we've seen more young people participating, as I said, in most of the higher health programs. And so that's part of the problem, and these are some of the things that we need to be doing. But before I sit down, I just want you to think about a couple of issues relating to mental health as part of the conversations. And I think firstly, and I think importantly, just as we would want to listen to and give support to someone who has physical injuries, which we can see, it is also important that we considerate of people who are going through, especially if they express and they tell us that they are suffering from a series of anxiety, of depression, they all along or all the time are thinking of suicide and all of that, that we need to think about the kind of support that we deal with. Dealing with mental health issues in our communities is still something that we, for lack of a better word, are illiterate. You know, would rather isolate people whom we believe are suffering from mental health related issues than help them go through and help to understand what they are going through. So we need to make sure that we're literate in helping deal with mental health related issues. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, you know, in interacting with some of the professionals, one of them who's working for Higher Health said to me, you know, you can look at someone and say, look, they're depressed, they're this, they're anxious and all of that. But all of us in one way or another have some form of mental health related issues. We may not accept it, but it is only the degree or the extent within which we have those issues and our ability to be able to cope with dealing and the kind of support that we get in dealing with you know, those issues. We worry about whether we're going to pass our exam. Have we studied enough? Why did we spend so much time in the shebeen? Why were we not listening in class? Why did we spend so much time with our girlfriend and our boyfriend? Are they going to dump us? You know, why did I drink my entire NSFAS allowance on Castle and Black Label? Now I have to, you know, spend the whole the whole month on 2-minute noodles. How am I gonna cope? So it is those. It's big and small issues, and I know you were listening quite attentively to Advocate when she was relating her story. So it is the degree within which we, you know, suffer from all of these things. On mental health related issues that differs from one person to, you know, to another. The third point is that we really need to, I think, open up and look into the kind of support that you know, most of our institutions are offering, the psychosocial support in particular, but also the support that you know, agencies such as Higher Health are supporting. And I think finally, linked to the points that I really want you, you know, to be thinking about is that you know, given the extent of, you know, and I only went into the numbers as it relates to suicide, which is an illustration of the extent of the problem. And, you know, given all of this, I think it's important that we treat mental health related issues as much more seriously than I think we could have. Yesterday, it was we're observing International Day, Mental Health, and I think we need to do more beyond what happens on the actual day. Awareness, treatment, support, and so on and so forth. So I really want to you know, congratulate the university for organizing this. I think it's quite an initiative, and we need these types of conversations happening in our campuses amongst students, but also students, academic, non-academic staff, and senior management. And I'm quite excited that you're providing leadership here, you know, Prof. You know, I really want to, you know, congratulate you for that. And thank you for listening. I hope to hear a lot more from you on what are the things that we can do, you know, in order to deal with and bring awareness to issues related to mental health. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for sharing quite a lot in a short space of time, from a global perspective via the World Health Organization and back to really the initiatives that we have also at national level. and true, you know, mental health is everyone's business, really. We all have a responsibility and a role towards ourselves, to play for ourselves and also a role towards others. Without taking much time, I'll see how much time we have at the end for me to add more perspectives. But I think it's time for us to really hear from the colleagues and student representatives from within the university itself, sharing their response, their reflections, and also just some areas to highlight in terms of initiatives that we are pursuing. We know it's not enough, and that's why we keep coming back to saying there is potential and room for more, and we need also your input and your contributions in terms of what other ways are there that we can raise awareness, promote advocacy. There's a movement across the world that's happening in countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, in Europe, as well as in other parts of the world. But from within the continent, we don't hear much about a movement, but maybe isolated groups, governmental or non-governmental, including at institutions. But there's so much potential to pull together our collective wisdom, as I said at the beginning, especially as an institution, since we have expertise in teaching and learning, in research and innovation, and also even in our partnerships with the community, and then of course our support programs for our staff and students. So without taking much time, let me introduce the panelists. We will have Dr. Reynel van der Ros, who's our talent manager, a senior talent manager specialist in HR, who will give her perspectives. And then we've got Mrs. Jalinda Niki Azunkili, the manager and psychologist from Welcome Campus. Actually, at Welcome Campus, like I mentioned yesterday, we had Higher Health together with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group and the Free State Department of Health, also doing this advocacy work and talking about what's possible and what more could be done. And then we've got our newly brewed SRC president on Bloemfontein campus, Mr. Matlaku Matsing, will be also giving a perspective from a student's voice perspective. And then we've got Professor Hester Friedrich-Nell, who's an associate professor in clinical sciences, radiography as a focus area. Also, who will be talking really in relation from the academic space, what's the experience there and how the academic space responds in terms of also supporting students. So thank you very much. We'll start with you, Dr. Reynel. I'm not sure if there's it would be nice, much better if, yes, we can just use the microphone here and you don't need to keep coming up to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Trust I'm audible. Good evening, everyone, I think esteemed guests. So I think this evening I will be speaking from the perspective of not only in my role as talent management specialist from the HR's perspective, but I think what was mentioned is my lived experiences as an employee at CUT. So just in terms of this whole notion around mental wellness, not only creating the awareness, not only doing things in terms of activities and tools that we do in terms of our staff members, but I think just reflecting back in terms of institutionally what was done, what's the approach in terms of this component. So at the university, I think what was mentioned by Advocate Zondo at the start of her powerful, the message that she shared with us, this whole notion around that we are not defined, yes, by our experiences, but we do know that experiences happen. I think as an employee in your working life, if you're a mom, student, irrespective of the roles that you have in life, you are affected by certain things that happen. So in terms of just the approach taken, so CUT as an institution, we have what we call the engagement survey or the institutional engagement survey, which basically goes around gauging from employees not only your level of engagement, talking about if you at that point in terms of engagement alone, but working, really focusing on things like burnout risk. So what's happening in terms of feedback from employees around burnout risk? What's happening in terms of employees with regards to aspects of psychological well-being? And I think from this perspectives of, I think that's the starting point, getting feedback from employees. And then from this flows what I think has been already put in place. And I think just a few key things that I can mention in terms of initiatives that has been put in place. I think it links back to what was mentioned around trying to establish maybe not a community, but maybe just a group of people, group of staff members in this case, where we have what we would call wellness topical talks. And these topical talks then focusing on things that have been identified by our staff members in terms of, I think just if I can mention a few examples, was the whole notion around fatigue. So going to bed, sleeping, but it's almost as if you are not well rested. It's this persistent fatigue that you have as an employee at the end of the day. Burnout risk, one of the other aspects that I can mention, a session that we have had a few weeks back focusing on, for example, things like work-life balance and personal and work-related stress. So these are, for example, just some of the initiatives in terms of institutionally just to create that community of a group of people coming together to talk around these aspects, not only in terms of a preventative means of creating awareness, but I think coming back to just for me to know what are the tools. And I think it comes back to this whole notion that was mentioned that we are so busy. I think as if you are working and studying or just studying, you are so busy at the end of the day doing life that you forget to just pause and forget to just remember. And I think what was profound for me, what was said by Advocate Zondo, this whole notion around, you know, who am I? And to just take a step back in terms of, and I think this is what we are also trying to create in terms of these sessions, to just have it's a short 30, 45-minute session to just breathe, to just stop and reflect. I might not necessarily be going through it, but someone else might be going through it, to get tools and get information with regards to that. So I think that's just one of the initiatives in terms of these topical talks that really link back to the approach that university takes in terms of what topics do we even select? I think the young lady mentioned the whole notion around we don't really want to come to these wellness talks because we don't really want to be associated with it. And I think that's been the experience from staff members as well. If I look at the sessions that we have, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, whether it's a session on the last one that we had is, I think it was personal relationships. And I think that cuts across your life. It's not only about your working environment, but it's about the attendance. But I think spaces like this, these types of events, really starts creating that platform to know that it's not just about a matter of I will be seen as someone who might be at risk at the end of the day, but it's about empowering ourselves, I think, at the end of the day, empowering myself in terms of not only knowledge, but about knowing that it's okay also to need help. So I think that was one of the main aspects that I needed to mention just with regards to, so some of the initiatives that have been done. I think what Minister also mentioned with regards to accessibility, with regards to whether it's a counseling psychologist, whether it's a social worker. So at the university, what the institution through its leadership has done is that we have partnered with Life Health. So basically, this is a part of an employee assistance program that offers psychological counseling services not only to employees, but to their dependents as well. So it comes back to looking at if someone in my household has an issue, back around the experiences of those I live with in my immediate family, how that affects me. So counseling services available not only to staff members, but also to their dependents if they need it. So I think nationally, I think the example that was made by one of the colleagues the other day was staff member here, maybe my child studying somewhere else in South Africa. So really an effort to give access, I think access to support, access to counseling support, nationally in your preferred language, in terms of these just access to staff members. And I think if I can just conclude, one of the things that were mentioned was just Minister looking at leadership in terms of, it's great to see that leaders are actually coming to the table to say, we are at the forefront of this. We want to facilitate these talks. And I think at CUT, just in terms of talking about the lived experiences, talking as an employee, I think to be at the end of the day thankful. I think not only to have the opportunity to work, but I think thankful to have access to things like whether it's a preventative session, whether it's just access to, even if it's telephonic counseling, but knowing that my family, we have that access. And I think it just comes back to that whole notion around just taking a second or two to just reflect back. And I think irrespective of your life, irrespective of the job and the role that you hold, however big or small it is, but just that access that I think that the institution affords to employees. Thanks.
Permission to continue? Okay. Sanbonani, Tumelang, Ligai. Okay. Now we are moving. Everyone seems or looks so, ta-da. Greetings and all protocol observed. As was previously mentioned, my name is Jelinda Ngili. I'm a counseling psychologist on the Welcome campus. And just a bit of knowledge from my side. The reason why I became a counseling psychologist is because of, I looked at my surroundings. I come from a very, 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 very small town in KZN. You see, I mentioned very more than 3 times. No, that's a big one. So I come from a town called Harding. I'm sure none of you have heard of it, ne? Hey, you see, oh, okay. Kaya. So I looked at the accessibility of psychologists in my town, and I found that there were none. Growing up, we did not have any access to any mental, to any mental health, accessibility, whether at a clinic, at a hospital, or even a private psychologist within the town. It's still the case now. We don't have a private psychologist within the town. And I told myself that I'm going to try and change this. And the notion around mental health from the perspective of the town that I come from is that if you are not okay mentally, it means that utagatiwe. And I really wanted to change that notion. I'm not giving away the fact that maybe utagati khona, or that people are living with, spiritual burdens and challenges. but also trying to come in and say, how is it that we can help from a perspective of a scientific way, in a perspective that has been researched and been looked at properly. So that is why I'm now here at the Central University of Technology. I find myself to be an advocate, not only of mental health, but an advocate of student issues. And I'm always willing to listen. What is it that students want, and how is it that we can facilitate, that change? So before I continue, I just want to do a little exercise with you. Looking around the room or just sitting in the room, even with our panel members, how many of you have said, I am okay, even when you felt that you were not okay? Many of us, ne? So we would tend to say that I'm okay, and even though we are not okay, it's difficult for us to stretch out our hand and say that I need help. How many of you have actually said, okay, I'm not okay, and I'm going out and searching for help? Very few of us, ne, as compared to the first number of hands. And you'd find that the first number would mostly be what? Which gender? Males. And why do we find that it's males that would usually say, I'm okay even though I'm not okay? Thank you. So it's because of societal norms. So we were taught from a very young age that what? Indoda ayikhali. So when indoda enjani, that's going to cry. Wiki. And we suddenly have found the new notion of, my colleague was just speaking about this yesterday, of indoda must. So indoda must do what? They must provide. So if they are not providing and they are not keeping their issues to themselves, then they are seen as weak. So we want to start changing that notion. And just looking at the bulletin, HPCSA, just yesterday, we find that over 400 million of people around the globe are actually suffering with mental illnesses. And those are known cases of mental illnesses. How many go undiagnosed? Looking at just SADC statistics, close to 260 individuals attempt suicides on a daily basis. 260. And of those 260, we have 26 successful suicides. And again, these are known cases. How many more cases just go as it was a natural cause or probably something just happened? So we really need to take these statistics seriously. Looking at our student population, we find so many student emergencies coming into our center because of attempted suicides. So we sit and we ask ourselves, what is it that we are not doing? What is it that we are doing, but we are not, touching there? So I'm just going to share. I've written down a few points because if I do not use my points, I will speak until, until Jesus comes back. So just yesterday, as I said, we observed World Mental Health Day. And the overriding theme was mental health as a universal human right. In saying that, this means that regardless of your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, the environment that you come from, and so forth, we all have a right to the access of mental health treatment, advocacy, as well as mental health practitioners. But looking at our realities, looking at our said realities, we find that this may not be the case. individuals across the globe struggle with merely securing an appointment with a psychologist or even just a counselor or even just someone to sit down and talk to in a professional manner. And this is a sad reality that needs to be relooked and readdressed. So looking at our students, most of our students will deal with a lot of depression issues. Do you agree? Stress and anxiety. Kuningi. And it gets kuningi. So around this time, we have a huge influx of bookings. Not only within our student population, but also in private practice. And research has shown that across the globe, around both September, October, people are dealing with a lot because we tend to make, those, New Year's resolutions. We set goals for ourselves. When it comes to around September, October, we realize that those goals have not been reached. We haven't even started, looking at the goals, and the pressures of life have become too much. So looking at what our students are dealing with regards to the depression, the anxiety, and the stress, we look at underlying issues, which are your unhealed wounds. Advocates spoke about traumas that were repressed. And when students come into our counseling centers, they have so many wounds that have not been healed. Some of them even ask questions to say, like, is this really a trauma? Like, Mara, should I really be here? Nyahlanya, what's wrong with me? And we find that these wounds are so deep-seated. For instance, issues with regards to absent fathers. Yes. And then also looking at something that we don't speak about much, absent mothers. Mothers who may be present physically, but are not there emotionally. They may be there, sorry. They may be there for your physical needs, but not much for any of your emotional needs. So no support base. And I think for most students, this hits harder than actually absent fathers, because we expect mothers to be what? Caring and nurturing. We also find that our students deal with a lot of expectations from home. One of our students stood up and said that we need to graduate, not only for ourselves, but for who? For our families. Some students get into courses or they start studying degrees that have nothing to do with what they want to do. But because they're informed by choices, they're informed by choices not only made at home, but by the society at large. And they find these expectations sometimes, damning and very, very difficult to carry. We also look at issues of poverty alleviation. The sad reality of it is that most of our students are defunded this year. Looking at the Welcome campus alone, close to 80% of our students do not have funding. And it's unfortunate that we cannot carry all of our students. So imagine coming from a poverty-stricken home, coming to an institution where you are the only light, the only source of light, only to find that you are going to be defunded in that year. And not only are you dealing with financial issues, you are dealing with other traumas. So it's always 4:10 for everyone. And we also find that we have students from across the country. They tend to struggle to fit in. Students, not only because of them not being from the Free State, but also coming from homes that are dysfunctional, find themselves having the sense of belonging, wanting or the need of belonging to something. Hence, they start doing or entering into actions that are not healthy. We also find that there are students in our midst that are what we would term the parentified child. I'm sure you guys have never heard of that before. The parentified child. So when we look at the parentified child, we look at a child that had had roles that were way above their age. For instance, having to look after an adult because they were drunk at some point. I'm coming to that one. Having to look after an adult because they were drunk, or having to parent your own parent, or having to be a parent to your younger siblings. It has become the norm, but it shouldn't be. So when our students come into university spaces, they are now young adults, or what we would call emerging adults, and they can't be those emerging adults because there's a stage in their life that they've missed, which was to be a child. Also, we find that a lot of our students have what we would call black tax. So black tax does not only start when students start, or when people start working, it starts once you start earning an NSFAS. So our students not only live on NSFAS, but they share this NSFAS with people back home. And at times it becomes a burden, and even though it's a burden for students, but they will still continue to share, with their family back home. So what is it that we have been doing as the institution or as the center to try and remedy these issues? So we have psychotherapy. On our campus, I think there's 3 of us that are psychologists. We have 2 psychologists and an intern, as well as on the Bloemfontein campus. So we allow for students to come and book sessions. We know that it's difficult sometimes for students to come to our counseling centers. Hence, we have relationships with SADC and your higher health so that students can actually call in and speak to a stranger. We also have events or activations that we have once in a while, like for instance, our wellness weeks. Like yesterday, also we had our mental health talks. So opportunities for students to get information. As Renelle said, sometimes it's not really about you going to seek the help, but you are going to have some sort of tools to use when the opportunity arises. We also have events such as your high tea that is geared at grooming young ladies. So we speak about issues, mental health issues, social ills, as well as looking at how spirituality can also factor in. Then we have what is called also men's conferences, whereby men can also speak about the issues that they have. We also have Wellness Connects, whereby students can come into a safe space where they are only students and they can openly speak about the issues that they deal with. Some of the difficulties that we deal with within the center is that students do not attend events that we organize. And I heard from OCC there that probably it's because they do not want to be associated, with such. Sometimes you'll be walking down the passage and one of your clients would see you, they will run the opposite way because just being in the same space. And we understand. We know that mental health has a huge stigma. And I'm glad that we have a huge crowd of students here who are going to go out and be advocates of mental health so that students can know that this is not something to run away from, but it's actually something that we can all come together and work towards. I thank you.
Dumelang, Lapila. My name is Mitzi Matlaku, the campus president. Let me start by thanking the VC for actually organizing this sitting and the panelists, attendees online and physical for honoring it. I think VC, I owe you an apology. I remember after the first meeting we had, you were telling us how you are a VC that likes to talk to students, and on our way out, we were talking with the finance officer. First meeting, she's already lying to us. So I must offer my apology I was surprised and happy actually when I saw the email. Um, let me start by, I'm only going to focus on mental health with regards to activism, as I'm an activist, with regards to student leadership, as I'm a student leader and I'm a student, and with regards to the youth in general. I'm very happy that at the back there I'm seeing a lot of activists. I always say, activists do one of these things. Either they smoke a lot, they drink a lot, or they go to church a lot. And the reason is uniform. Is because of the stories we hear from students day in and day out. And most of the therapists of the institutions, most lecturers, most HODs, deans, VC register, you'll probably never hear the stories. But if I were to give all of them, regardless of the organization they come from, a paper and say, write the top 10 worst stories you've heard, you would think they're lying. So there's a lady here, I won't mention her name, every week she usually comes to us and says, did you book for wellness? And every time we dodge because that 30 minutes in wellness, our fear is that there's a student that needs assistance. That's not going to receive that assistance. Now, I want to address the question of students not RSVPing. It's not that they don't want to come. Generally, from their perspective, they've accepted that no one cares. So it's in their mindset, they're like, why bother? Most students do not even know this sitting is happening, not because it was not well published, we saw it in the student meals, but because they saw mental health, they're like, why bother? The reason is because usually when there's conversations about mental health, the conversation is centered on how do we assist people with mental health. But it must also go on to how do we ensure the increase of people with mental health does not occur. I'm going to come to CUT. I think this is the case for every university across board. I'm very happy that Professor Frederick is here. I don't think she remembers me, but I was annoying her very much in January looking for space for students. It starts in January. It's going to happen again next year. So far, we've had there's over 300,000 applications, there's space for 4,500 students. They are going to come regardless of what the institution says. They are going to fall on those lines. The first problem we are going to have, which we have every year, they are going to be scammed. I've run out of the number of students just this year that paid registration fees to people that we can't even locate. Now the student has to go back home. They did not find space at CUT. They must go and tell their parents, where did the 6,000 go? Because it was sent. And most of those students that are going to be turned back because there's no space, they're never going to return to varsity again because they're going to readapt to the life they tried to escape. Then there's an issue of the very same student activists. Now all of us must stand in front of 5,000 students and say to them, yes, you did well, you passed matric, you qualify for every course, but go home. When all of us combined had the same experience, we know what's going to happen when they go back home. We know the future that they have. Because when we went back home, from all of us with our friends that went back home, maybe less than 20% got a chance to come back. Then now we go to those that are registered. Firstly, adapting to varsity life. People always laugh when I say for the first 6 months in varsity, I thought it was a blackboard. I thought it was a place. I was not aware it was on a computer. I found out, I think, around June. The lecturer kept saying, you get your slides on Etude. I kept looking, where's this Etude on my campus? And that thing is worse to a point where we have students who have now finished their course, full 4 years. They have to go and graduate. Then they come and ask us, where's AGU? It happens daily. Now let's go into what happens when students are already here with regards to adaptation. With this one, I think it is being solved in a way. There's a lady in the office of the SDO, Oluetu. Since you got hired, there's many activities happening. There was a problem with CUT was excluding going to the library to watch YouTube. There was nothing you could do, excluding go to the library or going to class. But now that campus life is starting to be resuscitated, at least something is happening. Because the problem it was causing was that students, particularly those ones that are introvert or those ones that don't understand the culture of the Free State or the culture of varsity in general. They would go to class, after class, go back to their flats, then they get bored. And there's nothing more dangerous than a young person that's bored. I learned that thing from my father. He always wanted me to be busy with something. Now, when they get bored, every idea starts to sound like a good idea because you have 3 hours till your next class. That's when blessers step in. That's with regards to females. Then another issue we have is there's not enough, and I think it's a case in most institutions, ways to know the backgrounds of students. We know they are coming from previously disadvantaged backgrounds, hence they're using NSFAS. But the backgrounds of the family, the house. There are students who intentionally decide, I'm gonna go date an older man just so he can pay for my December, January rent, so I don't go back home. This one, at least I'm volunteering sleeping with him. Back home, I have to forcefully sleep with my father or stepfather or uncle or brother. Those are the cases we know on a day-to-day basis. That okay. Then we have an issue of male students. Male students, same story. They come to campus, they get registered. Then Lebanon, because of boredom and nothing to do, they start to be creative. Now, the youth in general, when we are bored, we're dangerous. But when it's all males, the danger levels go high. We have so many students that we witness day in and day out being caught for stealing a phone, unnecessary theft. And when you ask them, they can't even explain why. They were just bored. Then when you check the age, some people might say, Marwa, then you check the age, and it automatically makes sense. 19-year-old, came from a street family, first time in his life, he's allowed to walk around the streets past 6. Now, everything that they could not do in high school, the opportunity comes to do it, because there's nothing to do around campus. Then with regards to another issue, I am happy that the Deputy Minister raised this issue. We're going to raise it in the meetings we see. It's the issue of students wasting NSFAS money. It's a fact, students do waste NSFAS money, but we must clearly diagnose why. Most students in universities, that's 1,650, is more money than their parents have ever gotten. So they don't have a point of reference on how to use that money, which is why most student organizations keep on emphasizing we need a compulsory module of financial literacy at institutions. Because a student arrives, because a student arrives usually in February, it will be food allowance and book allowance. They have 7,600, all in at once. That's more money than both their parents and in 3 months. There is no frame of reference. They waste all that money. For the next 2 weeks, they get depressed. Then they remember, hey, man, I'm getting this money every month. What happens? The whole year, they waste this money. By the time they realize and they learn how to use the money, they fill all their modules, they don't qualify for NSFAS the following year, they're going back to the townships, mental health continues. So for us, also I must mention wellness. We have been watching what they're doing and we are very happy. Institutions must invest heavily on bodies such as wellness, on individuals that show capacity and like to work with students. And also, above everything else, there's to show my point, particularly this one, I got it because Advocate Zondo talked about trauma response. I think institutions and the department, there's a question that they've not asked themselves, which proves when this thing of mental health is an issue. But unfortunately, they are not the only ones that must solve it. It's a responsibility of the country as a whole and society as a whole. You must ask yourself, how is it a student will go throughout their life, primary, secondary, previously disadvantaged background, dangerous conditions, working hard to reach varsity. Then when they reach varsity, there's strikes, whatever happens, burning of buildings occur, destructions of buildings occur. From what we have studied, every time any strike that I've seen turns violent is the moment private security and the police are called. And there's a reason for it. You cannot expect a student, a person that by the age of 7 years, that saw someone getting killed, that grew up around gangsterism, to first fear a rubber bullet. Secondly, the moment, remember, most of our experiences happened when we were young, when we could not fight back. Now I'm in varsity. My body is well built. You come with those private security. I remember how people working like them, looking like them, killed my cousin. But this time, I'm the same height as them, unlike the last time. I have friends who are the same height as them. The automatic response when students see private security and the police, I know maximum 3 days is gonna turn violent. But it never, ever happens when it is just protection services. Why? Because protection services deal with students day in and day out. We have a relationship with them. When they come to us, we see our parents. They have an understanding with us that no one in the institution will never have. And that issue is another factor that proves just how deep the issue of mental health is. But we see so far, I can say that if this is gonna be the new normal of CUT, then we are very excited to see what's next. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, panel members and esteemed colleagues. So I have the honor to be the last and to say everybody has said what I wanted to say. But I will do it anyway to honor my task here. So I think what we have heard is the complexity and multidimensional value or multidimensional approach of mental health, well-being. I like the term mental and psychological fitness because I think that's more a positive approach to that. So I saw what Michelle Obama said. And she said, we would never tell somebody with a broken leg that they should stop wallowing and get it together. And we won't even consider taking medication for an ear infection, something to be ashamed of. So we shouldn't treat mental health conditions any differently. And so I also read another quote which says, there is no normal life that is free of pain. I think that is what we also heard from Advocate Zondo. It is the very wrestling with our own problems that can be impetus for our own growth. And I think if we can, foster that in our life, then we will think differently of how life can be joyful. So I also realized that, this mental health and mental not being well mentally is underreported because of the stigma. I think we've talked about that. And I think mostly also because of a lack of knowledge. So the approach that I've taken here this afternoon is to talk from an educator and specifically in the Faculty of Health and Environmental Sciences in higher education. So I had a search and I saw that there were many studies done on this topic, specifically with the COVID impact in the higher education space. And funnily enough, many studies from all around the world, the globe, but very few published in South Africa, on South African populations. Maybe they are still coming. And many of the students involve medical students or allied health students, nursing students. And perhaps I think it is because these students also, in addition to the theory, work in the clinical spaces. They have to do clinical rotations. And there they also have to deal not only with their own wellness, but also deal with what patients go through and deal with that. So I had a look at what Professor Baantjes from Stellenbosch University is actually also from the MRC, but he did a study at the Stellenbosch University and where they said that students present with what we've heard, depression, anxiety, and that actually shows as their poor academic performance. So many times as educators, we see the students performing poorly, and because this is underreported and because of a lack of knowledge, we don't realize that the issue is mental well-being and mental fitness. So I think I've also heard this afternoon, and I've made a note of it, how I think about maybe my own life and also the students now having to leave their community, whether they had a functional or a non-functional family, their community, they have to leave that behind. Come to a community where it's totally strange and where they don't have go-to people. There's nobody that they can run to say, how can I adjust to this? And I've once heard about an outcome of a study where students related to the bus driver the best. So also to security. So students may relate to different people because they feel safe and they feel that that person listens to them and has an ear. So in this space where students leave their community and then come to university life, they sometimes befriend individuals who do not have a positive impact on their lives. I think SLC president has mentioned that. And they're also exposed to unhealthy habits. And then take into consideration the exam stress, the time of the year, under pressure, family matters, social media impacts, and peer pressure, not to mention only a few, which adds to the difficulty of student life. So in the last section of my talk, I want to propose, sometimes how a developmental approach to what and to interventions that we can use and maybe adopt at CUT. I think some of it is there in a little bit, but maybe we can emphasize that more. And to help us all to recognize or to assist with early recognition of the signs and symptoms, because that is key. I actually did not mention, but Prof. Banchi said that in their study they found that students do not know and they do not report, and then they report, but then it's too late, and then students expect miracle and quick responses. So I think SRC president also mentioned the importance of hearing the students' voices. And I believe that that is something that we need to listen to, without judgment. So the first intervention that I would like to propose is knowledge. And the cue is from Stellenbosch University, who introduced a mental health literacy and psychological fitness skills module, sort of as a core curriculum. So in this, they teach the students about problem solving, emotional regulation, stress management, developing healthy habits, sleep hygiene, self-care, understanding the self, goal setting, life skills, for a balanced life. And I think even academics can learn from that, how to do a balanced life. Because planning of personal and academic life is sometimes very tricky. Then, secondly, to break the isolation and find a go-to person that you can trust and become part of a caring community, such as mentors, peers, a study buddy, role models. Sometimes it could be even your lecturer. And then interactions with these kind of groups can assist in building confidence and building a positive attitude and learning to take responsibility. Because once I take responsibility, I can also deal with whatever actions follow. So such students are often shy, and they do not have the confidence to approach such networks. So perhaps we should make them that more accessible to students. And there must be a constant awareness at CUT of the availability of these kinds of interventions, and be more intentional about that. Then I think exercise and breathing and spending time in the outdoors, I think Advocate Zondo also mentioned that. Our campus is beautiful spaces. I know that some of the spaces are a little bit abused by some of the students, but we won't talk about that. We must learn to relax and unwind and recharge. Exercise changes your body, but also your attitude and your mood. And that is then to develop a positive attitude, because that is a choice. I have a choice to be positive, or I have a choice to be negative. And then the last intervention that I think is not to be shy to ask for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. But if I know myself, I can be proud of who I am, and I can then, from that point, reach out to seek help. So my last quote is, when you take care of yourself, you're a better person for others, and when you feel good about yourself, you treat others better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our panelists, colleagues, and Student Voice. I'm very satisfied, I'm very happy that you've all had an opportunity to hear from the different perspectives of very important role players in the institution. They may not be in a position to represent all of you. It's their perspectives and lived experience. But I hope you found resonance in a lot of what they've had to say. And I think what's important, as indicated earlier, is really your input, your comments to what has been said, and your additional input, so that we note, as role players, experts in the field, and different role players across our different roles on campus, but also in the communities that we come from. It's not just about the people who are here, it's also about you and what roles you could play in the community, in the communities that we interact with, internally, within the university community, and also externally. So I know we are running out of time, but we do need to have your comments, your questions, at least in the next 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be all the 10 minutes. If we finish earlier, it's fine. But really, we do need your input. There will be also possibilities to further communicate via that RSVP that you gave when you said you were coming here, on your perspectives and further input, because we can't cover everything here. Advocate Zondo, I hope you are still with us. We haven't lost you online, so you can cover questions, comments to Advocate Zondo, to the panelists, including the minister. I'm not going to summarize everything that's been said. Otherwise, we're going to keep repeating a few things. But I think you've noted the efforts. And I like what the president said, because this is what we were really trying to avoid, to talk more about the good things that we think we do. But we wanted to make sure we mention them, but we also leave room for more development and to learn from one another. So the microphone, I think, is going. Are there any hands already? The leadership is in the house. If we can start here in front and then go to the back. Thank you.
Greetings to the house. Am I audible? Sorry, I have flu. I have a question for Deputy Minister. Before I get to the question, you mentioned something earlier on to say that as a country and as human beings, COVID-19 was the biggest trauma that we're experiencing. But now I want to come into a context of us as students and as FAST-funded students. The biggest trauma that we are currently facing is direct payments, because now we are funded, but we're not receiving allowances because of now we have a middleman that is supposed to be giving us our resources so that we can prosper academically, and we are not receiving anything. So the question is, what's the point of us going to these facilities to get assistance? Meanwhile, the problem is in play. What's the point of me going to her about my mental issues, about my depression? That time I'm still hungry. At that time I'm still facing eviction. What's the point of it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And then the gentleman at the back. Oh, sorry. There's a question here in front, and then we'll go to the back.
Okay, thank you, Madam VC. My name is Siphumelele. I have a couple of questions, but I'll be as quick as possible. I think such platforms are good platforms. It's good for us to have mental health talks, and I actually want to commend the organizers of the event for such an event, but I think we shouldn't just end at talking about these issues. We need to execute, we need action. What is it that we're doing to assist with mental health? It's also important that we don't just look at the fact that there are mental health issues, but there needs to be recognition of the fact that, of the factors that contribute to the mental health issues, specifically in the higher education sector. So my first question goes, Advocate Zondo spoke of sharing her story on social media and how it has impacted many lives. More especially how she received love and support from people from social media. I equally believe that many more lives can be touched through technology and how mental health issues can be tackled similarly. What technology-based innovative programs have been implemented by the department to assist youth with mental health issues? That's my first question. If they have been implemented, how exactly and in what ways have these programs been availed to the youth? If they have not been implemented, why is this? And what is the time limit set for execution? There is a scourge in our country at large of gender-based violence, but it's important that we highlight that many of the known cases happen on campuses of higher education institutions. The reality is the crime rates in institutions are high, and it's not enough to just add policies, yet there is no clear understanding of those policies in institutions. What measures have been put into place for adequate norms and standards of safety and security? Again, what are the details exactly? Upon enrollment at CUT, gender and race is two of the things considered before your application is processed. Today is also International Day of the Girl Child. Is there a culture of gender equality put into practice at the department? What are the statistics that can be shared with us in terms of gender? And then lastly, with missing scripts, some not marked timelessly, some incorrectly captured in the institution, what is the position of the department in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the two last ones, and then they at the back, and then we get the comments.
Greetings to the house. My name is Tutugon Kosi, one of the students. As a point of departure, I would say mental health works, goes with substance use. Two factors. It is emotionally feeling they need drugs to fill a void in their lives. Secondly, it is psychologically general negative feelings towards themselves or the world. My question really goes to the panel. How do I tell my parents, my boss, or someone that is close to me about my about my health, mental health issues? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the last one at the back, there was.
Thank you very much. I remain Mohau Paid. I really understand the purpose of this sitting or gathering, Madam VC. But the question is that we have a wellness center there at CUT, whereby if we are experiencing these challenges, we have to go there and maybe set an appointment. But in most cases, we find that it's mostly booked or fully booked, and you're told to come at a certain time or period. So I want to understand the department's position about this. How are we going to make sure that we have, or we hire more staff such that people can be advocated for these mental health issues? I think briefly, my question is about the university being understaffed, but we are having more cases of mental health. What is the position of the department? Thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you very much for that first round of questions. We are not going to be in a position to address all the questions that you want to, to give you an opportunity to ask questions. But like I said, we'll open up space, further engagements. This event is just a step towards more engagements and listening and getting your input. So, Deputy Minister, it seems like a number of questions are towards the department. But I know it's a shared responsibility. It's not just the department, it's also what's happening at institutions and how we have conversations around how to improve. Maybe I'll start with the Deputy Minister and then Advocate Zondo. I think there were some comments also that were made that I'm sure you would be happy to respond to. And then the rest of the panel can answer that, especially that question around how does one really get to sit down and talk about very personal issues to, different role players when there are so many challenges that people grapple with, even to start that conversation. So, Deputy Minister, over to you.
Thanks. I think I'll give you the full script of my speech, which speaks to specific interventions. Firstly, in terms of policy, but also the work that we're doing with through Higher Health, and also some of the technological interventions and innovations that we've implemented over the years, whose intention is to facilitate access to available services. But I think the important thing is that activity has to happen on campus. And I'm happy to hear that you have a wellness center, because once you become a university student, it means, especially a campus-based students, it means 80 to 90% of your time is going to be spent here for 3-4 years. If you love education, even more years, probably. So it means that solutions, which include solutions around mental health, will have to come from campus. But I think beyond that, some of the policy proposals and guidelines that have come, through Higher Health, but also through our university branch, as recommendations to the universities, have been that we have to see students as fully rounded human beings, that you're not just here to get your degree. That's the important part. That's the reason why you're here. But we have to have an all-round type of students whom the university have to create platforms for them to fully express themselves. It could be sports, arts, culture, and so on and so forth. And I think someone spoke about a lady who's just been appointed. I think the SRC president spoke about someone who's just been appointed, who has been spearheading this thing of a fully rounded student. So we really support that. And then I think the other important element is peer-to-peer. And I hope it helps to also respond to the second last question about how do you tell your boss, your lecturer, and all of that. So the issue about authority, the problem with authority is that we sometimes feel that we do not want to burden authority with our, individual problems, meaning people that we deem as superior. We do not want them to burden them. We don't want to burden them with our individuals' problems. But if we strengthen peer-to-peer, and I think that's where the structures such as the SRC, the students' congresses and students' commands and associations and sports clubs and so on and so forth, that you have to come in to, it's easier to engage with your peers because the chances are you believe that they are facing similar challenges, or if they don't, they probably have in the past, and they will know how to resolve, some of those challenges. And so a critical element of our higher health approach is to strengthen the peer-to-peer mechanism. So when there's a shortage, which is, I think, also the last question, when there's a shortage of assistance in the wellness center and so on and so forth, we need amongst ourselves, particularly students who would volunteer, especially those students who are studying, programs that have to deal with, mental health. That will need them to, to volunteer their services to help, as peers, and so on and so forth. And then finally, I think, NSFAS has to have its own dedicated lane to deal with issues and how they, induce, mental health related issues on campuses. But I just want to say the following. I've been informed that there are issues, NSFAS related issues of CUT students. We have dispatched a team through the NSFAS structures to specifically deal with those students who are faced with NSFAS related challenges. This is the first year that we've implemented the student-centered model, a model which for years the students have been calling for, and obviously with the rollout of in the first year of this student-centered model, there has been challenges, and we do not take lightly, the fact that in some of the campuses more than 90% of the students do receive their allowances. It doesn't mean that we should not look at the 7-8% of the students who are not getting the allowances, and that's why we've made this an issue of priority, so that we're able to deal with the challenges related to NSFAS and the payment of allowances and all of that. And hopefully all those issues would have been dealt with by the time the NSFAS task team gets to attend to this. I agree with the proposal that the president of the SRC is making, and maybe we could have a conversation about how CUT could pilot potentially a financial literacy training program, basic intro. It doesn't mean that if you have gone through that, you will be able to use money responsibly, but there's nothing that says we shouldn't try. So I think we should just have a discussion about the possibility of such a program as a partnership, and a pilot. I mean, as a pilot it here, roll it out, see how it works, because I think it will go a long way, even beyond your life as a student. into adulthood proper and so on and so forth. So I think it's one thing that I'm interested for us to to go to. Finally, we are a country whose history is more than anything defined by violence. And that violence has continued into transferred into current and future generations. The little that I got from Mama Ricky is that whatever that she was dealing with, in a way, it found its way to be transferred to people around her, including her kids. And the same applies, so when I said COVID-19 is the greatest trauma that we've experienced collectively as a nation. Similarly, apartheid, for instance, is the biggest trauma that we experienced collectively as a nation. It doesn't matter where you stood as it relates to apartheid. For you to witness the violence that was happening in the township on the one hand, and on the other hand, to have been sent into the township to commit those violence. And just by way of an example, when Prince Buthelezi died a couple of months or weeks ago, there were mixed emotions on how to respond and deal with the death of someone like him, precisely because we have unresolved trauma issues that were the resultant of violence, that are a resultant of the history of this country. And those issues come up. Advocate Zondo spoke about the Holocaust, which happened years ago. Now imagine a system wherein those who were active participants in it, a system such as apartheid, where those who were active participants in it still have to negotiate moving forward into the future with that burden, with that trauma, and all of that. And the reason why I'm raising this is because how it becomes visible is the way in which we sometimes easily resort to violence as a resolution of some of the problems that we're confronted with, because we've been exposed to so much violence, to so much trauma. The Truth and Reconciliation could only do so much. And whether we are aware or not, whether we were alive in 1994 or even before, whether we physically, emotionally experience the trauma of apartheid or not, in one way or another, that trauma still continues. And I think we need to find ways within which we can deal with that trauma, because it is one of the biggest baggages that this country is going to be carrying for quite a long time. It is, I think, yet too soon for us to only refer to it as a memory when it permeates still in one way or another in almost every facet of our life. Don't say I'm blaming mental health issues on apartheid, because it's an easy and flippant way to dismiss it. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that violence, trauma, and so on and so forth, historic as it is, and transferred as it is one of the things that we have to deal with, as a country. And I think you, of all the people, are better placed, young people from all walks of life in our country are better placed to confront these historical issues and not dismiss them as issues that your parents were faced with, and that it's none of your business. I think you're better placed to be dealing with those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I think you have to allow us now to close the circle and get last comments from Advocate Zondo. With the internal colleagues and the student voice, our journey is ongoing. It doesn't end here. So I think really just to close for today, because I'm very conscious also of our hotel schools supplies out there, the refreshments that they have prepared for you, and they have been waiting for quite a long time. And it is our students, as you know, and they do a wonderful job. And I also don't want to impact on their time and the fact that they also need transport to be taken to their various places afterwards. So Advocate Zondo, any last comments and picking up on some of the questions or comments that have been made as a way of closing, and then we will get the registrar to come and do a vote of thanks, and then I'll say just the last words around the offer you made in terms of the book and the signing for people who are interested. So when the registrar comes, registrar, we're gonna also give the gifts together when you're done speaking. So over to you, Advocate Zondo, to close off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to pick on one a question that was posed that relates to technology to access services. I've put on the chat that the Ricky Rick Foundation for the Promotion of Activism has partnered with the Panda mental health app. And I'm holding up my phone now, and I'm hoping you'll be able to see it. It's such a cute panda. It's purple over there. So you can download this app, whether you're using the iOS or Android system. What you will find then is access to community, access to resources that inform about mental health, as well as access to various talks on various subjects where you can participate throughout the day. And this is also where you can get access to coaching. You do have chat coaching with a qualified coach, and you have access to a free consultation session with a psychotherapist via chat. So they are readily available services. You can participate in them. So I just wanted to answer that question about what technology-based services could be available to students. The Panda Mental Health app is one. Please try it out. Thank you. And deepest gratitude for having me today. The work that you've started is very, very important. May there be more and more room opening up to grapple practically with what mental health and well-being means for students on campus, for faculty, and for everybody who is involved with your campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Advocate Zondo. I think in 5 minutes we will be done. I think it would be good for you to also listen to the vote of thanks from our very own Dr. Zingwa, the institutional registrar. Thank you.
Thank you, VC. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all those that are non-binary. I am greeting you all. I believe that at this point of the program, all protocol have been observed. So I'm going to proceed with what I am meant to do, and that is to deliver a vote of thanks to everybody that participated today. Let me start by thank you, the VC, for setting the tone, for restating the theme of mental wellness and indicating and reminding us that mental health is a fundamental, universal human right. I think this event symbolizes your commitment to doing such deep dive on issues but most importantly, with the intention to addressing them. So we really welcome this. Advocate Zondo, if you're still present online, your humility was expressed through your delivery. We could feel how the connection, you delivered that with the utmost respect. And I want to reiterate that it is difficult. We could see it in your eyes, but because you expressed the Ubuntu that we so aspire to as CUT, we could resonate with your pain. And we want to thank you for sharing your lived experience and hope that you and your family will be comforted, find healing and peace in knowing that the life of your son will remain celebrated, and we will continue to call his name Ricky Rick Makhado. Yes, Rick. Deputy Minister, thank you so much for unmasking the socioeconomic issues that really underpin why we are dealing with mental health issues in our societies. I think you indicated at the beginning that you want to stick around, take stock of everything that we're saying today, but really to take note of what the needs are. So we want to thank you and the ministry, your collaborators. I know you mentioned Higher Health, but I do believe that there could be business industry that is also contributing, and I want to really include them in this delivery and wish that you express the very same to them as well. So say you're sitting here to the end of the program is indicative of the support that we so want to have from the department, and we want to thank you. To our esteemed panelists that contextualized, the approaches from internal, our capabilities as the university, what system we have in place to provide support from the point of view of both staff and student, but also recognizing our limitations as well from a student perspective, but also, from an academic viewpoint, to really summarize and indicate with authority that this issue that we are grappling with today is multifaceted and requires different skills and approaches to be able to be dealt with decisively. So for our panelists, we really, really welcome the diverse nature, the diverse inputs that you have provided to this dialogue. And we will be taking stock of all of these and really framing a way forward in supporting the initiatives from each and every section as we move along. Some truths are very difficult to hear, but they must be heard. But I do believe that this dialogue today really will shape how we change the future of our youth in their time. In their time. Meaning, while they are still young and energetic, we need to be intentional about addressing those issues. And I think this provided a platform for us to be able to do that. They've provided firm recommendations that we can take forward. And let me just thank everybody that took the time to be with us today, present in this venue and outside, also online. I want you to really, really spread the word, help destigmatize what we are dealing with. And your presence and taking the time is really appreciated. Vice Chancellor, you've also been a program director in this session. I mean, that if that's not leadership, I don't know what leadership is. And I want to thank you. It's such significant events that happen at the right time for the right purpose. And we really, really want to thank you for that. She was pushing for this to happen. She was not accepting no for an answer. So in conclusion, I think it will be a mess for me not to recognize the front runners everywhere where they are. If you are listening, you're online, you link into this platform, we want to recognize those that are the first people to encounter those that are struggling with mental wellness, whether students, parents, communities. If you're the first responder, you get to see the pain, to feel the pain, to internalize the pain, and it will be a miss if we did not recognize your value in our society. And we say to you, we salute you. Continue, 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 and we will be here to support the journey that we so believe in, and that is to change our dynamics. To the organizing team, the marketing team, the Vice Chancellor's office for the coordination, I really want to thank you. This is the outcome of your work, and I think you should be proud of yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that the VC wants to close the session and did indicate that the hotel school has prepared a meal for us in the foyer. I just want to allow you to clap hands for yourselves because you've been absolutely wonderful, each one of you. And then I'm going to ask my colleagues to just assist the Vice Chancellor and myself to hand over the gifts. VC? So thank you very much. I'm not going to do other thank yous. I just wanted to highlight, because not everybody had seen the book or had read it. So for those who are interested, Advocate Zondo has graciously offered that if there are people who indicate an interest in having a copy, books can be couriered with, with a signature. There's a kind of signed paste. You can paste. It can be pasted on the book. But if you write something when you RSVP, like I said in that RSVP thing, you give us input on actions going forward and so on. But you also can say something about whether you would like a copy of the book and signed and how signed. So we will look at that. At the RSVPs and see if there is any response in terms of that. So, but Advocate Zondo, thank you so much again. You will get your gift also couriered, since everybody that's here on stage has been able to get a gift from CUT. We really would like to thank you again, over and over again. It can never be enough for you to spend so much time with us when we know there's been also some challenges that have prevented you from being able to come and be present with us here physically. So we really appreciate your graciousness and in taking the time and staying throughout. And the same goes also for the Deputy Minister in being able to be here throughout. Most of the time people give a speech and then they go. And we really are grateful for the fact that you did make time, you did make provision to really engage. And I hope for the CUT community that this is, you can see the efforts that are being made and that this is a genuine commitment to making sure we address these issues for both staff and students, for the whole university community, and also to just keep emphasizing that we also have a role even to our extended communities outside of CUT. So this story doesn't end here. We will carry on. So please do enjoy the hospitality of our hotel school, and do remember to thank them. They are our students. They are studying a very exciting program, and they do their job with excellence. There's a lot also to learn from them and how they do what they do and how they, put us on the map every time we have guests, and we like to showcase them.
just like we like to showcase everybody that's part of the CUT community, because we want you to leave this institution being proud, as I was saying about my Inanda Seminary, to be able to talk about that for an institution where I was donkey years ago and still hold this allegiance to it. That's what we would like to see happen with the CUT community and even more. Thank you very much. Do enjoy the rest of the evening.